our office today. He is a Democrat member of the Virginia House of Delegates. He represents the 28th District, which includes parts of Loudoun. He was first elected in 2017. As a member of the House of Delegates, he has focused on issues such as education, healthcare, and economic development. He has also been involved in advocating for policies related to social justice, environment protection, and improving public services in his district. Before his time in the House of Delegates, Reid served in the U.S. Navy Reserve, and he also has 2 children. He is known to be a family-oriented individual, and his personal life often reflects his commitment to family and to our community. I am honored to have you here today. We are not going to be talking politics, unfortunately. Today we are here because of this amazing book, Delegate David Reid, he wrote. And tell us a little bit bio or something additional about you before we talk about this book. Tell us about the history and how did you get to the politics?
So thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you for having me here today. This is really such an honor, and I'm really grateful to be here to be able to talk about my book, Virginia Grit. It's really very interesting. When I first started running in 2017, you find out as a candidate that people want to know more about who you are as a person because they want to know who that they're investing their time and their money in as a potential representative. So things that I had never had a reason to talk about as an adult and about my life growing up, all of a sudden became really very important and really very defining on the campaign trail. And as I would tell the story about me growing up poor in the mountains of Virginia, occasionally people would say, "Oh my gosh, you have such an amazing story, you should write a book." So that was 2017, and it took me about 7 years and a lot of encouragement along the way, and taking time to sit down and write those stories and anecdotes from my life growing up and how they went about informing the choices that I make now as an elected official. And that's the reason why the subtitle on this is From Poverty to Policymaker, Creating Opportunity for Everyone. So that's how I ended up getting around to writing a book.
So how long have you been? How long did it take you to write this book?
So that's really, so I know that I said it's about 7 years, but it's like people started telling me that, oh, you should write a book. And then I will freely admit that it's like one of those things that I did with my time during the pandemic was that I would sit down and start writing chapters of this. And you don't start out by writing chapters. There's different things where it's like, if you talk to people about how you go about writing a book, they will tell you different ways to do it. They'll say, if you write a page a day, then at the end of the year, you will have written 365 pages. That's pretty substantial. If you sit down and you write for an hour, then at the end of a week, you'll have written for 7 hours. So the way that people will tell you to go about becoming an author is to do it in small, digestible bites. What ended up happening is that I would wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and I would go downstairs and I would have breakfast, and then I would say, okay, today I'm going to write. And I'm only going to write for an hour, or I'm only going to do a page. And I would sit down and I would start writing, and then it would turn into, this would be on a Saturday, and it would be 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had been writing for 6 or 7 hours. And so, and the way that I did this, my writing style was, I would remember the things from my childhood, and I would write down a sentence or two. And then I'd think about something else, and I'd write down a sentence or two. And then I'd go back in, and I'd fill in those gaps along the way. So that's how I started the process.
Wow. Did you ever thought that you wanted to be a writer?
So I enjoy writing. One of the things that I did when I was in the Navy Reserves is I was an intelligence officer, and that requires a lot of writing. And also, as I worked in my professional career, because I worked for 35 years in the Northern Virginia business community in 7 different unique industries, including business development, which requires writing proposals. I also did work as a counterterrorism officer. That requires writing intelligence reports. So I developed an ability and an enjoyment for writing. Writing about yourself, though, is so much more difficult because you have to be able to write in a way to share those really very vulnerable stories that kind of shape who you are as a person. And also, because I grew up really very poor, there weren't a lot of pictures there, and my mom left home when I was 6 years old, so there weren't a lot of relatives around who could share, oh, well, I remember you doing this, or I remember you doing that. So I had to really kind of like peel away the cobwebs in my head and try to remember the dialogue that was going on. Because that's another one of those things where it's like, as an intelligence officer or in writing business development proposals, you don't write dialogue. I had to teach myself how to write dialogue to be able to bring to life the stories in the book.
Wow, wow. How do you come up with the title to your books?
Oh, that's really very interesting because when I originally, so I have a friend of mine who, when I moved out to Oklahoma with my foster and then adoptive parents, because my family has lived here in Virginia since the 1790s, and we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
We were immigrants in the 1790s. You were immigrants in the 1990s, but we came and lived in Rockbridge County, and we have always been poor. I am the first person in my family going back 12 generations to ever get a college degree. And that college degree allowed me to break the cycle of poverty that my family had lived in for generations. And so when you start deciding how you're going to write a book, you then also, it's like, okay, who's going to publish it and who's going to edit it? But when I was living out in Oklahoma with my foster parents, I met a person out there who, I was in the Young Democrats, he was in the Collegiate Republicans. This is when it was still okay for Democrats and Republicans to talk to each other and not be angry. We could disagree without being disagreeable. Yeah. And he then later went on to work for Microsoft, became a best-selling author, started his own publishing company, and so that connection from what feels like 100 years ago, then he became the publisher, and then he connected me with an editor. And his name is Greg Shaw, and he now moved from Seattle, Washington, and now that he's getting closer to retirement, decided that he's going to go live in Lexington, Virginia, which is in Rockbridge County, where I was born and raised. Wow. So it's just amazing for me how the world is just so small when you really start thinking about the connections. And one of the things that I like to tell high school students and college students when I go talk to them, it's like how you treat the people who are sitting next to you now will play out in your future. Those people will either remember that you were nice to them and be supportive of future things that you want to do, or they'll remember that you were not nice to them and will not be willing to be supportive. And so I try to encourage all of these folks, just treat people the way you want to be treated.
I love that. What was one of the most surprising things you learned while writing this book?
Oh, and you were asking about the title. The original title for the book was called Journey. This was the title I came up with because it was a journey from poverty to being a policymaker. It was a journey from the mountains of Virginia to Loudoun County. That was the thematic framework that I used for writing it initially. And it was about twice this big. When you give it to an editor and you give it to a publisher, half of it ends up on the cutting room floor, and they then said to me, we don't like that title, and we don't like that subtitle. And so then they started coming up with new things that I was able to pick from. So that was an interesting part of the experience. The other part was the interesting part of the experience was the stuff that, like I said, ended up on the cutting room floor. There's at least this much again that did not make it into the final book because the overall objective was, how do we take your lived experiences and map those to the things that drive you as an elected official and how it informs the policies that you make. And so that was part of that whole process. And I would say one of the things that was most telling or most poignant, I mean, I had a really difficult childhood. Like I said, my mom left when I was 6 years old. I went to go live at the Methodist Children's Home in Richmond when I was 10, which at that point in time was very much like an orphanage. And then went to go live with foster parents who then adopted me when I was 16. And rewriting all of that stuff was very poignant. And there's parts of it and there's stories in there that even though I lived it and I wrote it and I rewrote it and I edited it and it's like when I read it, all of those emotions come pouring back again. And that's the part that's so very poignant. It's one of those things where it's like we can have scars on the back of our hand that kind of remind us of things. There are also mental and emotional scars that I think stay with us all of our life and shape who we become.
Wow. Do you think, what is like a lot of to do before you drive in? You think to start to write the book?
Before you start to write, and again, everybody's going to go about this in a different way.
Yes.
For me, no kidding, some of my quiet time is when I'm getting ready in the morning, okay, brushing my teeth. Most simple thing in the world. I can't be on my phone, I can't be on my computer, I can't be, but it's like I'm brushing my teeth and I'm thinking about things. And I can remember the feeling when my mom left, okay? And so then I started to put index cards, 4x6 index cards on my dresser with a pen. And I'd go and I'd jot down things. That would then be the cueing part that I could then go down and fill in that story around it. Because if I didn't do it right then, I would lose that memory and everything else that went with it. And so that became the way that I would dive into it. It's just by those things that would come to mind, write it down. And I remember another one where it was like, and again, we talked about this in the book, and I say we, because it was me, the editor and the publisher, about growing up poor and we didn't have the money for me to be able to have a bicycle. We would go to the junkyard to get rid of our junk, the landfill, but we would find old bikes there and pick them up and bring them back home and then put together our own bikes. And so doing all of that and learning how to work with tools and to make parts fit together that didn't fit together before are things that I think shaped how I go about addressing policy issues. I so enjoy when somebody has said, we've tried this before and it can't be done or it can't be fixed. For me, that's a challenge. So it's like, well, let's see if there's a different way of approaching it. And I can trace that back to how I was brought up and the things that I had and the things that I didn't have.
So you did really put connection between your personal life and the policy to be written on your current work.
Yeah, very much so. And like you said in the introduction, if you think about this, from the time that I was born until I was 10 years old and I went to the Methodist Children's Home, I pretty much did not have health care or dental care or vision care. And I remember when I finally went to the children's home and I got glasses. I then found out, I mean, I knew intuitively, but I then found out that the trees actually have leaves on them. Because my eyes were so bad, at a distance, I couldn't see the leaves on the tree. I had dental care for the first time and was able to, I still have fillings in my teeth from then that are the old classic kind of mercury-based fillings, milk, mercury, and silver. And my sister, she was 6 years older than me. She was 16 when we went to the children's home, and her teeth were so bad that they wanted to pull all of her teeth and give her dentures. Can you imagine a 16-year-old getting dentures? But this is the reason why when we were having discussions in 2018 and 2019, in the Virginia General Assembly about Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
This is something that was so very important to me because it was a lived experience. This was not something that had just affected my dad or my granddad. It wasn't an anecdotal story I heard from somebody. This was a real, live, lived experience. And we were, at the time, as a state, we were sending about $2 billion a year to the federal government in our tax dollars, and then we were not taking advantage of this benefit. And that was just something that was so very disturbing. And it's those type of things that you will find in the book, the connections between growing up in poverty and then how it informs my policy today.
Where do you see the book industry heading in the next decade?
That's a really interesting question, because one of the things that I've had, it's really been interesting, this whole process, because this is a hard copy book. Amazon then turned it into a Kindle version. But I have had also other people ask me for an audio version. And I'm not sure what the process is to be able to do an audio version. I don't know if that means I have to sit down and read it and do it.
Yeah, I guess.
But I think that we oftentimes think that everything's going to go digital. But I will tell you that for my own personal benefit, I still like having a hard copy book that I can look at, I can read through, I can highlight, I can dog-ear things in. I still find that there's something very tactile to having a hard copy book. So I think that there's going to continue to be a role for that. There are other people, like my oldest daughter, who's 29. She works for the federal government, and she takes the metro from Ashburn down to the federal government every day. And so for her, she very much likes to have a small Kindle with an electronic version, because then she can read it while she's on the metro. So there's still a role for different people, and people go to the beach, and I will tell you, it's like when I go to the beach, I try to take a hard
That's
copy.
what I'm taking with me.
Yeah.
I would tell you, I am not fan of Kindle. I'm not fan of podcast. It's not me. I still love to have a paper book and read and actually make a comment and highlight a good sentence. It did attract me, and read it again. This is how I am too. So there is still people love to have book on paper and read.
I think so too.
What advice would you give a new writer, someone just starting out? What advice would you give them?
What's the old story about anyone could eat an elephant? You just need to do it like a spoon or a fork.
Yeah.
I think
Because nothing is impossible.
Right.
I always say that.
And I think that's the way it is that when you sit down at a blank piece of paper or sit down in front of your computer and you go, I want to write a book, and you're thinking, I need to write 1,000 pages. It's just such a daunting task. And so if you do it in small bits and then you come back to it, because as you start to write, and then that will be cueing for something else in your memory. I've now toyed around with the idea of, okay, do I have the ability to be able to write a fiction book? Something that might be like a Tom Clancy type of thing. And you look at that, and it would be the equivalent of like this, like 3 times over, whatever, 800, 1,000 pages. And it's like, you just think about that on your own, and it's a very daunting task. But when you start breaking it down, because one of the things that you'll find, it's like if you go on to my Delegate website, you'll find a link to this, but you'll also find a link to all of the op-eds that I've written. Op-eds are about 750 words long. And a chapter in a Tom Clancy book is about 2 op-eds. It's about 1,500 words. So if you start thinking about it, it's like, could I write an op-ed? Yes, I've done that before. Could I write 2 of those and put them together into a neat little chapter or a story? Yes, I think I could do that. Could I write enough of those for a book? Probably. Could I convince a publisher to publish it? I don't know.
So are you telling us right now it's going to be another book?
I think there will be another book in the future. I don't know what it will be. I will tell you that already there's a section in this book that talks about my memories, my most memorable moments from each one of my first 6 sessions in the Virginia General Assembly. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but a long time ago, Encyclopedia Britannica used to have the encyclopedia, a hard copy.
Absolutely.
And then every year they would issue a yearbook. So it would be like the 1960 yearbook. This was all the things that happened in 1960 to kind of update them, because it was all hard copy. So what I did is, because the book had already gone to print, I had a news story for my 7th session, which would have been 2024, and it wasn't going to go into the book, so I wrote it as an op-ed, and it's a link to that is out there on my website. I now feel obligated to write another op-ed about
please.
the 2025
and want
session.
Another book.
Well, and I think
again, for the fan of book,
Yes,
still,
yes.
still love to have book in hand.
And I think that there will be another one. I'm not sure what it will be. Some of the things, like I've done several book events now, which is really an interesting experience as well. I was just down in Rockbridge County. I think it was just 2 weeks ago, and we did a book event down there because that's where I'm from. So we did that. We did one at the Methodist Children's Home because, of course, I had lived there, and there are children there who were going through a lot of the same things that I went through, so it was an opportunity to go and talk to them. But people have said to me, some of the things that I talk about in the book and some of the things that I talk about when I'm in those situations are good life lessons for everyone. So maybe a next book will be more talking about those life lessons.
Moments. Or
Yeah.
maybe some more of the moments.
Yeah.
You don't see yourself having a politics book.
Not right now,
Yeah.
no. I will, again, if you look at the website and you look at the op-eds, you'll see
Yeah.
that there are some of them
Yeah.
that are political in nature. One of the very first ones that I wrote about, and I know you don't want to talk about politics here, but I think it was in 2022. So we're in session, and the Republicans had been in the majority for decades and would come to Richmond complaining about the lack of school funding to build and construct schools in their areas. We don't have that issue in Loudoun County because we have a strong economic basis. But funding the construction of schools is really a local issue. And so, but we had enough budget surplus at the time that I put in a budget amendment and proposed a program about how we could use state funds to be able to build schools in rural areas or urban areas that didn't have the economic ability to be able to do it. And the Republicans who were in the majority at the time killed that budget amendment. So part of the op-ed that I wrote and everything was that here was an opportunity, because we had the money. We could have still given everyone the tax cut, and we had the money to be able to create a working capital fund, because there are 2,000 schools across the Commonwealth, 2,000 public schools across the Commonwealth. 1,000 of them are 50 years old or older. I have visited schools where the suspended ceiling is leaking because of leaks in the roof, or parents will get a notice in like the Harrisonburg school system that have your child bring water to school today because we're having a problem and the water is all coming out brown. Those are things that are happening right here in Virginia, and we have the money to be able to address it, and we just have to have the political will to make it happen. So I did write, there are political op-eds out there, but I don't know that I'm going to write a political book just yet.
Yeah.
Maybe in the future.
Any favorite books to read, or you are currently reading, you suggest the audience to read, and why?
So I will tell you that when I'm usually reading for fun and enjoyment, I'm reading science fiction. And my favorite author is Isaac Asimov. And so I have the entire Empire Foundation robot series, which I think is 14 books. And I think I go back and I reread all of them about once every 10 years. And they're really very easy to read. Some of the things that science fiction authors write have now come true, things like the iPad or the cell phone or different things like that. But it is a way to just be able to kind of disconnect a little bit from the problems and issues of today and read something that is just much more interesting. The other thing that I will tell you that is an interesting byproduct of writing a book, now when you read a book, you look at it differently. You look at the flow, you look at the dialogue, you look at, oh wow, this is written with short sentences as opposed to long sentences. This is how the author helped to craft the scene. So these are all things that when you just read, you don't think about it. But once you've written a book, because it's like when I wrote this initially and I gave it to the publisher, he gave it back to me and said, you need to add more color to this. You need to add more dialogue. You need to add more of this. I thought that he was going to give it to an editor and they were going to do that.
Yeah.
No, it's like he said, here's my constructive criticism. You now need to go fix it. And I'll tell you, no kidding, I had to set it aside for like 4 months because I had invested so much time and effort into it and I thought I was done. And then I had to come back to it again with a fresh set of eyes and go, okay, now that I'm reading other people's works, I can understand the deficiencies in mine and approach it with a different attitude.
This is great. Where can the audience buy this book from?
So the book is currently available on Amazon. And like I said, it's available on Amazon with a hard copy as well as on Kindle. And I believe that there are other online bookstores. I think maybe Barnes & Noble and some other ones that have it as well.
Okay.
So it is available out there. And it's been really very interesting. When it first came out, and there were people buying it, occasionally I would get notification that it was in. It's interesting because Amazon has all kinds of different subcategories of bestsellers.
Yes.
Okay, I'm using air quotes of best. So it's like it would be like number 3 or number 5 or number 2 or whatever of political and local government bestsellers. And it's like, okay, what does that really mean? Does that mean that there were like 3 books in the category and I came in 3rd? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it really means.
Yeah.
But it has been an enjoyable and therapeutic experience. And the thing that I think has been the most rewarding is people reading it, having a better understanding of where I come from. And the thing that has been the most rewarding of all is having the ability to talk with young children who are going through what I went through. And I have talked to them, and I've had children that are coming from broken homes, who are in foster care, who have gone from one set of foster parents to another, say to me, send me thank you notes and say, I used to think that I couldn't do anything, and now that I've talked to you and I've read your book, I believe that I can do anything. And so that is so very rewarding. And if I can do that and I can change one person's life and make a difference for them the way that people along the way help make a difference for me, because that's one of those things that I like to highlight. Anybody who ever tells you, I did this all on my own, they're lying to you. All of us who have been able to be successful, whether it's you or me or others, have had help along the way. And I can point to either the folks at the children's home or even my dad after my mom left, who said, on $3,000 a year, I can't take care of 5 children, and took us to the children's home. He made that very difficult decision. Or the teacher at Randolph-Macon Academy when I was going there, who I was probably 14 or 15. No one had ever before, up to that point, had said to me, you're a really very smart young man. You can do anything you set your mind to. And those little words of wisdom and support along the way, and then all of the other things, are what has allowed me to get to where I am today. And so, if the book is a way for me to be able to give back and to be able to inspire the next generation and the next person who is going through all of those difficult times, then it's well worth the time and the effort.
Indeed, Delegate Reid, because I would tell you, I am successful business, and this is not because I didn't do all this by myself and alone. My community is huge, and I say always, I never felt I am alone in Loudoun County. I never felt, because my community is a huge part of my success, and I always say that, and I will repeat it for the next 10 years probably. So you are absolutely, because we are not alone.
No.
That's why it is important to be around the community every day. So we appreciate you.
And I think the way that you're giving back by helping the next generation, and by me doing what I'm doing, that's the right thing to do, is to pay it forward for the next generation, because we know that it's like, if you help 2 people become successful, and I help 2 people become successful, and then they help 4 people, then it will be worth all the time and the hard work.
Yeah, I can't wait to read the
Good,
book.
good.
I will be bringing you back for the next book.
Good, all right.
I will give you the feedback about this book, and I'm excited to read it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I want to thank you very much. I know we had to reschedule 2 times. You were in Richmond working hard to your community with the General Assembly and all that. So thank you for your time. This is mean a lot to us as community, for you to be here today and talk to us about your book, Virginia Grit.
Thank you so much.
I can't wait to read it, and we want to thank you, and hopefully everybody will purchase the book and read the story of Delegate Reid.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.